I have seen drivers come into my courtroom with excuses, so rehearsed they sounded almost professional. Flat tires, missed notices, confusing paperwork, a payment that must not have gone through, a spouse who was supposed to handle it. A company that never mailed the reminder, but I will tell you something I have never forgotten. The case that began with a motorist letting his insurance lapse did not stay about insurance for very long. It became a case about a crushed car, a hospital bed, a missing envelope, and a man who believed one expired policy could hide something far worse than negligence. The defendant's name was Daniel Carter. He walked into my courtroom wearing a navy blazer, pressed khaki pants, and the expression of a man who expected embarrassment, not danger. He looked like someone prepared to apologize, pay a fine, and leave before lunch. Across the aisle sat a woman named Melissa Grant. She did not look at him, not once. She sat with her hands folded tightly around a tissue, her right wrist still in a soft brace, her face pale beneath the fluorescent courtroom lights. Beside her was her father, Robert Grant, a retired firefighter with the kind of quiet anger that does not need volume to be felt, and in the second row, sitting in a wheelchair, was Melissa's younger brother, Ryan Grant, 21 years old, college student, part-time delivery driver. A young man who, according to the initial report, had done nothing more than stop at a red light. That was the first detail that bothered me. He had stopped. That sounds simple, doesn't it? A red light. A young man obeying the law. A normal intersection on a rainy Thursday evening. Then Daniel Carter's SUV slammed into the back of him so hard that Ryan's vehicle was pushed into the crosswalk and spun nearly sideways. On paper, the citation was routine, driving without valid insurance. Failure to maintain financial responsibility, possible careless driving. But paper, as I have learned over decades on the bench, has a way of making human suffering look administrative. A hospital bill becomes a number. A damaged spine becomes bodily injury. A young man learning to stand again becomes medical recovery pending. And a defendant who says, "My insurance just lapsed," can sound careless instead of dangerous. That morning, Daniel's attorney, Peter Lang, stood first. I knew Peter. He was smooth, efficient, never wasted a word he did not intend to use. He explained that his client had allowed his insurance policy to lapse accidentally. A missed payment, a billing issue, an unfortunate oversight. He described Daniel Carter as a hardworking family man who had never intended to drive uninsured. Then he said something that caused Melissa Grant to finally lift her eyes. "This was a mistake, Your Honor, not a moral failure." I wrote that sentence down. Not because it was clever, because it was premature. Lawyers sometimes try to tell the court what a case is before the facts have had a chance to breathe. And when a lawyer begins too quickly with morality, I start wondering what kind of behavior he is trying to keep out of view. Daniel Carter sat very still while his attorney spoke too still. There is a natural discomfort people carry when they have hurt someone, even by accident. They glance toward the victim. They shift in their chair. They show shame in small, involuntary ways. Daniel did none of that. He stared at the table, not at Ryan, not at Melissa, not at the medical photographs, at the table. Years on the bench teach you that avoidance is a language, and Daniel Carter was speaking it fluently. Assistant District Attorney Olivia Bennett stood for the state. She was calm, but I could hear something beneath her voice. Not anger, precision. She said, "Your Honor, the state believes the lapse in insurance was not accidental." Peter Lang immediately objected. Too quickly. I looked at him. That is one of the small moments most people miss. A fast objection can mean a lawyer is protecting procedure, but sometimes it means he knows exactly where the dangerous road begins. I allowed Miss Bennett to continue. She placed a document on the evidence monitor. It was an insurance cancellation notice from Daniel Carter's carrier. The policy had been canceled 32 days before the crash. 32 days, not 1 day, not a weekend delay, not a payment caught between banks. 32 days. Ms. Bennett then displayed the reminder emails. First notice, second notice, final notice, cancellation confirmed. Each one had opened, not merely received. Opened, the courtroom became very quiet. Daniel's face tightened. Only slightly. But I saw it. Melissa saw it, too. She leaned forward as if she had been waiting for someone to say out loud what she already suspected. That this was not a man blindsided by paperwork. This was a man who had been warned, reminded, and still chosen to drive. Peter Lang stood again, arguing that opening an email does not prove understanding. He said people's messages skim them, misunderstand them. He said modern billing systems create confusion. He was not wrong in general. But court is not built on general possibilities. It is built on specific facts, and the specific facts were becoming uncomfortable. Mess. Bennett clicked again. A new image appeared, a screenshot of a text message. It was from Daniel Carter to his coworker. Michael Reeves sent 11 days before the crash. Insurance is dead for now. Just gotta stay lucky till payday. I remember the sound that moved through the gallery. Not a gasp, more like the room inhaled and forgot to exhale. Ryan Grant looked down at his lap. His father closed his eyes. Melissa's tissue twisted in her hands until it nearly tore. Daniel Carter finally looked up, not at the victims, at the screen. That mattered. Because his first reaction was not to the people harmed by his choice. It was to the evidence proving he knew. I asked Ms. Bennett how the text was obtained. She explained that after the crash, Daniel told officers he believed his insurance was active. But during a related civil inquiry, phone records were subpoenaed, and messages showed he had discussed the lapse with multiple people. Then she said something that shifted the case again. The state also has reason to believe Mr. Carter attempted to hide evidence after the collision. Peter Lang was on his feet before she finished. Your Honor, this is a traffic matter being inflated far beyond its legal scope. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I looked at Ryan Grant. His wheelchair was positioned just behind the prosecution table. His left hand rested on the wheel rim, fingers curled slightly, as if he still expected to move easily, and then remembered his body had changed. No, counsel, I said. This stopped being a simple traffic matter the moment bodily injury, knowledge of the lapse, and possible concealment entered the record. Peter sat down slowly. Daniel Carter's jaw moved once, like he was grinding down words he did not trust himself to say. Miss Bennett then called Officer James Miller. He had responded to the crash scene that night. He wore his dress uniform, spoke clearly, and carried the professional fatigue of a man who had seen too many roads become court exhibits. He testified that Daniel appeared nervous at the scene, but not injured. Ryan was trapped in his vehicle when officers arrived. Rain was falling. Traffic had stopped. Melissa, who had been driving behind Ryan in a separate car, arrived minutes later and found paramedics cutting open the driver's side door. I watched Melissa as Officer Miller said that her face did not change, but her breathing did. Trauma often returns through details. Rain, sirens, broken glass, a certain smell, a certain sound. People think memory lives in the mind. It often lives in the body. Officer Miller said Daniel told him his foot slipped on the brake. Then Daniel said the road was wet. Then Daniel said Ryan stopped suddenly. 3 explanations within 9 minutes. That is another thing judges notice. Truth is usually consistent because it does not need to search for itself. Lies often arrive in versions. Bennett asked Officer Miller what Daniel provided when asked for proof of insurance. He showed an insurance card on his phone. Was it valid? No. What did Mr. Carter say when you informed him the policy appeared inactive? Officer Miller looked toward Daniel. He said the system must be wrong. Ms. Bennett nodded. Then she asked, did anything else happen at the scene that concerned you? The officer paused. That pause changed the room. Yes, he said. Mr. Carter kept asking about a black envelope from his vehicle. I looked down at my notes. A black envelope. Until that moment, no envelope had appeared in the filings I had reviewed. Ms. Bennett asked him to explain. Officer Miller said Daniel repeatedly asked whether officers had recovered a black envelope from the passenger seat of his SUV. He said it contained work documents. The officer told him evidence recovery would be handled after the scene was secured. But later, when the SUV was searched, no black envelope was found. Peter Lang objected, saying there was no proof the envelope ever existed. Ms. Bennett did not argue. She simply placed another exhibit on the screen, a still image from a nearby gas station security camera. It showed Daniel Carter's SUV 3 minutes before the crash. The vehicle was parked beside pump 4. Daniel stood near the open passenger door. In his hand was a black envelope. The courtroom went silent again, because now we had a new question. What was inside that envelope? And why did an uninsured driver care about it more than the young man trapped in the car he had just destroyed? Then Ms. Bennett enlarged the image, and I noticed something that made my hand tighten around my pen. Standing beside Daniel Carter at that gas station was another man, a man the police report never mentioned. A man Daniel Carter claimed he had not seen that night, and when the image sharpened, Melissa Grant whispered one word from the front row. Ryan, not because the man was Ryan, because Ryan knew him. When Melissa Grant whispered Ryan's name, every person in that courtroom heard it differently. Some heard confusion. Some heard fear. I heard recognition. And recognition in a courtroom can be more powerful than any argument a lawyer makes. The image on the screen showed Daniel Carter standing at a gas station 3 minutes before the crash, holding a black envelope beside a man in a dark raincoat. The man's face was turned slightly away from the camera, but not enough to hide him completely. Ryan Grant, sitting in his wheelchair, stared at the image like the past had suddenly walked into the room and stood beside the defendant. His sister Melissa leaned toward him. "Ryan," she whispered again, "you know him?" Ryan did not answer immediately. That silence told me something. People hesitate for many reasons: fear, doubt, shock. But Ryan's hesitation was different. It was not the hesitation of a man trying to remember. It was the hesitation of a man realizing he had remembered too much. Assistant District Attorney Olivia Bennett turned toward him carefully. "Mr. Grant," she said, "do you recognize the man standing with Daniel Carter?" Peter Lang rose quickly. "Objection. Mr. Grant has not been called as a witness." I sustained it for the moment, but the damage was already done. The jury had seen Ryan's face. They had seen Melissa's reaction. They had seen Daniel Carter's eyes move toward the defense table, not toward the image, not toward the victims, but toward his attorney, as if asking how badly that single frame had hurt him. I ordered a short recess, not because I wanted to slow the case down, because when a courtroom suddenly discovers a new person in a case, the law requires order. Evidence must be handled carefully. Witnesses must be questioned properly. A judge cannot let shock replace procedure, but during that recess, I stayed in chambers staring at that still image, Daniel Carter, the black envelope, the unknown man. 3 minutes before the crash, and then Ryan Grant stopped at a red light, was hit from behind hard enough to change his life. I have lived long enough inside courtrooms to know coincidence exists. But I have also lived long enough to know that coincidence is sometimes the word people use before the pattern is ready to show itself. When court resumed, Olivia Bennett requested permission to call Ryan Grant. Peter Lang objected again, arguing that the state was turning a traffic insurance matter into a conspiracy with no foundation. He said, "Your Honor, this entire proceeding is being driven by emotion." That phrase again, emotion. Lawyers use that word when the facts begin to make people feel something inconvenient. I looked at Mr. Lang and said, "The court is not moved by emotion. The court is moved by relevance. Proceed carefully, Miss Bennett." Ryan was sworn in from his wheelchair. I watched him raise his right hand slowly. His body moved with effort, but his face remained controlled. He was young, far too young to sit before a court, with medical braces under his shirt, and the future he expected now suspended in legal language. Olivia began gently. "Mr. Grant, do you recognize the man in the gas station footage?" Ryan looked at the screen. "Yes. What is his name?" He swallowed. "Christopher Hayes." At the defense table, Daniel Carter closed his eyes just once. But I saw it. And believe me, if you ever want to know when a defendant hears the first real crack in his story, do not watch his mouth. Watch his eyelids. Watch his hands. Watch the body parts he cannot fully command. Olivia asked, "How do you know Christopher Hayes?" Ryan's voice became quieter. He worked at the warehouse where I delivered packages. Not officially, I think. He was around sometimes. He handled cash pickups. Did you interact with him? A few times. And did you see him on the day of the crash? Ryan looked toward Daniel Carter, then back at Olivia. Yes, the courtroom tightened. Olivia did not rush. When? About an hour before the crash. Where? At the warehouse loading entrance. Ryan explained that he had been making a delivery to a private logistics warehouse on the east side of town. He said he arrived early, parked near the side entrance, and saw Christopher Hayes arguing with another man near a black SUV. Was that man Daniel Carter? Olivia asked. Ryan looked at the defendant. Yes. Daniel Carter's attorney immediately stood. Objection. Identification reliability. My client was not mentioned in the original police report as being present at any warehouse. Olivia turned toward me. Your Honor, Mr. Grant suffered traumatic injury shortly after these events. His initial statement was limited due to medical condition. We also have delivery GPS records placing him at the warehouse. I allowed the questioning to continue. Ryan said he did not hear the entire argument, but he heard enough to understand it was about money. Christopher Hayes had a black envelope in his hand. Daniel Carter kept saying, "Not here." Then Hayes said something that Ryan remembered clearly. You already took the risk. Those words moved through the room quietly, but they landed hard. You already took the risk. I looked at Daniel Carter. His jaw tightened. Ryan continued. He said he tried not to stare. He finished his delivery, returned to his car, and began driving home. As he left the warehouse district, he noticed the same black SUV behind him. At first, he did not think anything of it. Then it stayed behind him. Turn after turn, street after street, Ryan paused there, and I saw his hand tighten on the armrest of his wheelchair. Trauma does that. It returns not as a memory alone, but as a physical grip on whatever is closest. Olivia asked, "Did you believe you were being followed?" "I didn't want to believe that," Ryan said. That answer was painfully honest. People in danger often do not accept danger immediately. The mind tries to protect itself by making excuses. Same route, same traffic. Coincidence, nothing serious. We tell ourselves ordinary explanations because the extraordinary one is too frightening. Ryan said he reached the intersection at Maple and 4th. The light turned red. He stopped. Then he looked in the rearview mirror. The black SUV was behind him. "I remember the headlights," he said. His voice thinned. They didn't slow down. Melissa began crying quietly in the front row. Robert Grant placed one hand on his daughter's shoulder, but his eyes never left Daniel Carter. Olivia asked Ryan what happened after impact. He said there was a sound like metal folding around him. His chest hit the steering wheel. His legs went numb. Rain came through broken glass. He heard someone shouting outside, but he could not move enough to see who it was. Then he said something I will never forget. I kept thinking, why didn't he brake? The courtroom stayed silent because that was the question all of us were asking now. Not whether Daniel Carter had insurance, not whether he missed a payment. Why didn't he brake? Peter Lang crossed Ryan carefully. He had to. The jury was watching a young man in a wheelchair answer questions about the moment his life changed. Aggression would have hurt the defense, so Peter chose another tactic. He suggested Ryan's memory was affected by trauma. He suggested pain medication, shock, and confusion may have mixed details together. He suggested Ryan had seen the gas station footage and filled in gaps afterward. Ryan listened without anger. Then Peter asked, "Isn't it possible, Mr. Grant, that you only believe my client followed you because you now know he hit your vehicle?" Ryan looked down for a moment. I thought he would say yes. Then he reached into his jacket pocket with trembling fingers and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Olivia Bennett looked surprised. So did Peter Lang. So did I. Ryan held it out. "My phone was damaged in the crash," he said. "But before I left the warehouse, I wrote down the SUV's plate number on a delivery receipt because it made me nervous." The courtroom went still. A court officer carried the paper to the bench. It was creased, stained, and torn along one edge, but the writing was clear, a license plate number, Daniel Carter's license plate number. I looked at the defendant. For the first time, Daniel Carter looked directly at Ryan Grant. And the expression on his face was not surprise, it was resentment. That was when I understood something deeply troubling. Ryan had not been an unlucky driver stopped at a red light. He had been a witness. And Daniel Carter had known it before the crash ever happened. Olivia Bennett then turned back to the evidence monitor. "Your Honor," she said, "there is one more item from the gas station footage." She zoomed in on the black envelope in Daniel's hand. The image was grainy, but the envelope had a white label across the front. 3 handwritten letters were visible. R.G. Ryan Grant. Melissa stood up before anyone could stop her. "That's his name," she said, her voice breaking. "That's Ryan." I struck the gavel once, but gently. "Ms. Grant, please sit." She sat slowly, shaking. The courtroom was no longer breathing as one body. It was waiting as one body because now the black envelope did not look like business paperwork. It looked like something connected to Ryan before the collision, and then Olivia Bennett said the sentence that made Daniel Carter finally lose the color in his face. "Your Honor, the state believes Mr. Carter was carrying documents stolen from Ryan Grant's vehicle before the crash." Peter Lang rose, but this time he did not speak. Because even he seemed to realize the case had just crossed into something far darker than expired insurance. Olivia looked toward Ryan, then toward me. "And we believe the crash may have been staged to destroy what Mr. Grant had unknowingly discovered." When Olivia Bennett said the crash may have been staged to destroy what Ryan Grant had unknowingly discovered, I watched the jury before I watched the defendant. That is something years on the bench teach you. A courtroom does not change all at once. It changes person by person. One juror stops taking notes, another leans back, another looks at the defendant not with curiosity anymore, but with suspicion. And when that change spreads across the jury box, you can feel the entire balance of a case shift. At the beginning of that morning, Daniel Carter had been a man accused of letting his insurance lapse. Now he was sitting beneath evidence that suggested something far more deliberate, an uninsured vehicle, a witness at a warehouse. A black envelope labeled with Ryan Grant's initials, a collision that happened minutes later, and a defendant who had given 3 different explanations before the rain had even stopped falling. Peter Lang stood slowly. Your Honor, this is speculation piled on speculation. There is no evidence that my client stole anything, no evidence that he intentionally struck Mr. Grant, and certainly no evidence that an expired insurance policy has anything to do with some alleged warehouse conspiracy. He said the word conspiracy carefully, almost with disgust, as if giving it a name made it sound ridiculous. That is a tactic. When the facts are frightening, make the theory sound foolish. But Olivia Bennett did not look shaken. She asked to call Michael Reeves, Daniel Carter's co-worker. That name had already appeared once on the screen in the text message where Daniel admitted his insurance was dead. I allowed it. Michael Reeves entered through the side door wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt and the expression of a man who wished he were anywhere else. He was not the polished type. He looked uncomfortable with the oath, uncomfortable with the microphone, uncomfortable with the defendant's eyes following him from the defense table, and Daniel was watching him very carefully, not like a friend. Like a warning, Michael took the stand and swore to tell the truth. Olivia began with simple questions. Where he worked, how long he had known Daniel, whether they were friends. Not close friends, Michael said. We worked together. What kind of work? Private courier contracts, cash transport sometimes, documents, after-hours deliveries. That got the jury's attention. Olivia asked if Daniel had discussed his insurance lapse with him. Michael nodded. He said he couldn't afford the renewal that month. Did he continue driving for work? Yes. Did you tell him not to? Michael looked toward Daniel, then back down at his hands. I said it was risky. Olivia paused. And what did he say? Michael swallowed. He said the company didn't care as long as the deliveries got done. Peter Lang objected to hearsay, and I limited the statement, but the impression remained. Daniel had not simply driven uninsured once. He had continued driving because he believed the risk was worth it. Then Olivia moved to the night of the crash. Mr. Reeves? Did Daniel Carter contact you before the collision? Michael shifted in the witness chair. Yes. When? About 30 minutes before. What did he say? Michael hesitated. The entire courtroom leaned into that hesitation. I have seen witnesses hesitate because they are lying. I have seen them hesitate because they are afraid. Michael Reeves was afraid. He said there was a problem at the warehouse, Michael said. What kind of problem? He said a delivery driver saw something he shouldn't have. Ryan Grant closed his eyes. Melissa's hand moved to his shoulder. Daniel Carter stared at Michael without blinking. Olivia asked, did he identify the delivery driver? Michael nodded. He said the kid from Grant Delivery. Ryan's father, Robert Grant, leaned forward in the second row. The phrase was casual, almost dismissive. The kid, Ryan, was 21, not a child. But to Daniel, he had been reduced to an inconvenience. That is how dangerous decisions begin. First, you stop seeing a person. Then it becomes easier to hurt them. Olivia asked Michael what Daniel wanted him to do. Michael looked at me, not at Olivia, not at the jury. At me, that happens sometimes. A witness will search the bench for permission to stop being loyal to the wrong person. I said nothing. I only held his gaze. Michael breathed out. He asked if my brother still worked at the body shop. The courtroom became very still. Olivia asked, why would he ask that? Michael's voice dropped. He said he might need damage handled without paperwork. Peter Lang rose immediately. Objection. Sustained as to speculation, I said. Miss Bennett, rephrase. Olivia nodded. Did Mr. Carter say anything about a crash? Michael rubbed his palms together. He said, if something happens tonight, I need the SUV gone fast. The words landed heavily. If something happens tonight, not if I get pulled over. Not if there is an accident. If something happens. I watched Daniel Carter. For the first time, his face had lost that careful courtroom neutrality. His eyes were narrow now, his jaw tense. He was angry, not because Michael had misunderstood him, but because Michael had repeated him. There is a special kind of rage people show when their own words return to court without their permission. Peter Lang began his cross-examination sharply. He asked Michael if he had received immunity. Michael said no. He asked if Michael had been questioned by police for hours. Yes. He asked if Michael was afraid of being charged. Yes. Petter turned to the jury as if that answered everything. So you have every reason to make Daniel Carter look worse to protect yourself, correct? Michael looked tired. Then he said, I have every reason to tell the truth because I waited too long to do it. That answer stopped Peter for a second. Not because it was legally perfect, because it sounded human. Olivia then introduced phone location data. Daniel's SUV had been at the warehouse, then the gas station, then behind Ryan's route for nearly 12 minutes before the crash. The state did not need imagination. The map drew the path: warehouse, gas station, Momley Avenue, 4th Street impact. A thin red line on a digital map became a timeline of intent. Petter argued traffic patterns, coincidence, shared routes. The city was small, he said. People drive the same roads, but Olivia clicked again. A second map appeared. This one showed Ryan's normal delivery route from the previous 2 weeks. His path did not usually take him past that gas station. That night, he had changed course. Ryan answered when Olivia recalled him briefly. He said he saw Daniel's SUV following him, became uneasy, and decided not to go straight home. He took a longer route, hoping the SUV would turn away. It did not. The jury understood before Olivia explained it. Daniel Carter had not simply been on the same road. He had followed a frightened young man who was trying not to lead him home. Then Olivia returned to the black envelope. Police had never found it at the crash scene. Daniel had asked about it repeatedly, then later denied caring about any envelope at all. But officers eventually recovered something from a drainage ditch 2 blocks from the intersection, a torn black envelope. Wet, muddy, partially burned at one edge. Inside were fragments of documents. Most were destroyed by water, but one piece remained readable. Olivia placed it on the screen, a printed invoice with the name of a warehouse company, a cash amount, and a handwritten note at the bottom. Move before audit. Christopher Hayes' name appeared beneath it, and beside that, faint but visible, were the initials DC Daniel Carter. The courtroom became quiet in a different way now. This was no longer only about a lapse, no longer only about a crash. It was about money moving through private courier routes, records someone wanted hidden, and a delivery driver who saw too much. Olivia explained that Ryan had unknowingly picked up the wrong envelope during a delivery run. He believed it belonged in his stack of paperwork, but when Christopher Hayes realized the mistake, Daniel Carter was contacted. According to the state's theory, Daniel went to intercept the documents before Ryan discovered what they showed, but Ryan had already seen enough to know something was wrong. That was why he wrote down the plate number. That was why he changed his route. That was why the impact happened at the red light. Peter Lang stood and said, "Theory is not proof." He was right, theory is not proof, but fear has its own evidence. And Ryan Grant had behaved like a man being followed before anyone told him he had reason to be. Then Olivia said she had one final exhibit for that day, a recovered voicemail. It had been left on Christopher Hayes' phone 7 minutes after the crash. Daniel Carter's voice filled the courtroom, breathing hard, shaking, not with sorrow, with panic. "I hit him. I hit the kid. The envelope's gone. You need to tell me what to do." No one moved. Even Peter Lang stared at the table. The recording continued. Daniel's voice dropped lower. "If he talks, we're finished." And then the voicemail ended. I looked at Daniel Carter. At that moment, the man who walked in, prepared to apologize for expired insurance, was gone completely. In his place sat a defendant staring at a courtroom that had just heard his own voice explain the truth he had been trying to bury. But the most chilling part was not that Daniel said he hit Ryan. It was what he said next. "If he talks, we're finished." Kept. Not if he dies. Not if he is hurt. If he talks. And that told me Ryan Grant had never been the accident. He had been the witness. By the time Daniel Carter stood before me for sentencing, the expired insurance card was no longer the center of the case. That small digital card, the one he had shown the officer in the rain, had been the first lie, but it was not the deepest one. The deepest lie was that Ryan Grant's crash had been an accident. I watched Daniel stand beside his attorney with both hands clasped in front of him. His suit was still neat. His hair was still carefully combed. He still looked like a man who wanted the world to see him as ordinary, but ordinary men do not follow witnesses through city streets. Ordinary men do not leave panicked voicemails saying, "If he talks, we're finished." Ordinary men do not care more about a missing envelope than a young man trapped inside a crushed vehicle. Ryan Grant sat near the front of my courtroom in his wheelchair. His sister Melissa was beside him. His father, Robert, sat behind them with his hands folded so tightly his knuckles had turned pale. I had watched that family through every hearing. At first, they came looking for accountability for an uninsured crash. Then they discovered that Ryan had been followed. Then they discovered he had unknowingly carried evidence connected to illegal cash movement through private courier routes. Then they heard Daniel Carter's own voice admit what fear had already told them. I hit the kid. The envelope's gone. Those words did not sound like a confession of regret. They sounded like a man angry that the consequences had become visible. Before I pronounced sentence, Daniel was allowed to speak. That right matters. Even defendants who lie, manipulate, and destroy lives are given the chance to stand in court and address what they have done. Daniel rose slowly. He looked at me first, not at Ryan, not at Melissa, not at Robert Grant, at me. That told me almost everything I needed to know. He said, Your Honor, I made mistakes. I should not have been driving without insurance. I panicked after the accident, but I never meant for anyone to be hurt. There it was, the word accident, still trying to survive. Still trying to cover the truth like rainwater over skid marks. He continued, I was under pressure. People above me were involved. I got caught in something bigger than myself. I have heard that sentence in many forms. People above me. Pressure. No choice. I was scared. Sometimes those things are true. Sometimes fear pulls people into terrible decisions. But fear does not erase the person left broken on the road. Fear does not turn a witness into a target. Fear does not explain why Daniel had 32 days of insurance warnings, 11 days of knowing he was uninsured, and enough time to call coworkers about hiding damage before he ever thought to tell the truth. When he finished, the courtroom remained silent. Then I looked at Ryan. He asked to speak. His voice was not loud, but every word carried. He told the court that before the crash, he had been saving money to finish school. He wanted to become a physical therapist. He used to run in the mornings. He used to drive without thinking about mirrors, headlights, or the sound of tires behind him. Now he measured his life in medical appointments, pain levels, insurance forms, nights when he woke up remembering the impact. Then he looked at Daniel Carter and said, You didn't just hit my car. You made me afraid of every car behind me. That sentence stayed in the room. Melissa began crying quietly. Robert Grant lowered his head. Daniel Carter did not look at them. Not once. And that, more than anything, revealed him. A truly remorseful person turns toward the people they harmed, even if shame makes it painful. Daniel Carter turned only toward punishment. I addressed him directly. Mr. Carter, this court has heard your explanation. This court has reviewed the evidence, and this court has watched your conduct from the night of the crash to this very moment. He stood still. You allowed your insurance to lapse. That alone was reckless. You continued to drive knowing your policy was canceled. That was not confusion. That was a choice. His jaw tightened. But this case did not end there. You followed Ryan Grant after he witnessed something you wanted hidden. You carried documents you later tried to conceal. You struck his vehicle while he was stopped at a red light. And after the collision, your first concern was not his life. It was the envelope. The courtroom was completely still. I continued. You have tried to call this panic. You have tried to call this pressure. But the evidence shows planning, concealment, and a willingness to sacrifice another person's safety to protect yourself. Daniel finally looked down, not in sorrow, in defeat. There is a difference. I sentenced him to prison for aggravated reckless assault, evidence concealment, obstruction, and related financial crimes. I ordered restitution for Ryan's medical expenses, lost income rehabilitation, and long-term care. I also ordered that the evidence connected to Christopher Hayes and the warehouse operation remain with the state for further prosecution. Christopher Hayes would face his own courtroom, so would others, because once the black envelope was opened, it did not reveal one corrupt man. It revealed a chain of them. But that day, my courtroom belonged to Ryan Grant. When the sentence was read, Melissa covered her mouth and cried. Robert placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder. Ryan did not smile. He did not celebrate. Justice rarely feels like celebration to victims. It feels like breathing after being held underwater. Daniel Carter was taken into custody without struggle. As deputies led him away, he turned once toward Ryan. For the first time, their eyes met, and Ryan did not look away. That was the moment I remember most, not the insurance notice, not the gas station footage, not even the voicemail. I remember the young man in the wheelchair looking at the man who changed his life and refusing to carry the shame that belonged to someone else. After the courtroom emptied, I remained seated for a while. Judges do that sometimes. Some cases leave behind a silence that paperwork cannot absorb. I thought about how small the case looked at the beginning. A motorist lets insurance lapse, a missed payment, a traffic violation, a fine, a form. But behind that small phrase was a truth far darker than anyone expected. One expired policy revealed a man who thought responsibility was optional. One crash revealed a witness someone wanted silenced. One black envelope revealed corruption moving quietly through ordinary streets, and one injured young man revealed the courage it takes to tell the truth when the person who hurt you wants the world to believe it was only an accident. That is why I still remember the case, because the law is not only about rules, it is about what happens when someone breaks those rules and another human being pays the price. Insurance is not just paperwork. A red light is not just a traffic signal. A witness is not just an inconvenience, and a life changed by someone else's selfishness is not just collateral damage. Daniel Carter entered my courtroom hoping to be seen as careless. He left exposed as something far worse. And Ryan Grant, who came in as a victim of a crash, left as the witness whose courage uncovered the truth. That day reminded me of something I have carried with me ever since. Sometimes justice begins with a document, sometimes with a video, sometimes with a voicemail. And sometimes it begins with one simple question no guilty man can answer. If it was truly an accident, why were you trying so hard to hide the truth?